everyone. So my name is Sidi and I'm a program officer at Minds. I've probably been in contact with most of you. So thank you so much for attending, and we're really looking forward to your robust and constructive conversation. So just a heads up, we'll have speakers, and our speakers are going to be within the time frame. And the bulk of this conversation should be the discussion on the ground. And so like the open discussion. So if you have your hand up or you have a question or anything like that, we might ask you to speak if that's possible, but can you please keep it short, concise, so that we can give a chance to everyone, so that we can have diverse perspectives. And then also, because this is a political discussion, although it is a political discussion, we are apolitical as Minds. And I mean, this probably goes without saying, but we will probably we'll just ask that attendees respect each other, like different political backgrounds. So this is not a conversation about which political party to support, but rather about political participation. So I believe that we have participants. I'll say hi to everyone from Zambia, hi to everyone from Malawi, from Namibia, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe. I think we have a lot of people from Zimbabwe. We're really looking forward to your discussions, and yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, I'll just give the floor to our moderator, Dr. Moy, if that's okay.
So if I may, I just want to put a few points on the table, so to speak. I think there are now a number of African countries that have demonstrated that because of the superiority of the youth in terms of demographics, there is nothing in terms of election outcomes and quality of those results that the youth cannot determine on the African continent if they so wish. The key elements, however, that are very important to acknowledge or to take on board are that those numbers mean that you need to consciously take agency of creating the kind of either country or continent that you want, which in itself presupposes a consciousness and an awareness, acute awareness of what that future looks like. So the initial investment is about clarity on the journey traveled, the results achieved to date on that journey from a historical perspective, and in our context tends to be pre-colonial, colonial period, and post-colonial Africa, and what appeared as our objectives when we were fighting for independence. You need to be, I think, very aware of that history, and then force yourselves to crystallize as much as possible. Have an image in your mind of what kind of future you want to create, what kind of future would work for you, and then accept the agency of creating that future. You cannot be aware of a future you want and then delegate the responsibility of creating it to somebody else. It is your responsibility. So that's point number one. Point number two, which I think is really very important, is that in most endeavors in life, strategy determines what the outcomes are going to be. And the mistake I see us making, and I say us as a collective, is that we tend to enter a contestation with protagonists who very often are either stronger than us or are better resourced than us because of circumstance, because of history, because of incumbency. But we seem to irrationally adopt their strategies in the contestation. I think it's not rocket science to realize that if I am stronger than you, if I'm better resourced than you, and you're in a contestation with me, and you adopt my strategy in going into that contestation, the odds are that I'm going to win. And therefore, it appears to me to be not properly thought out when we continuously take on a protagonist who is better resourced, stronger, is incumbent, has got access to all manner of resources, but we go in there and adopt their strategies. So use the superiority of your numbers, take agency, understand your history and the journey traveled to date, analyze the results achieved so far, and then determine what needs to be done differently in order to deliver what you perceive as your desired future, and take ownership of that journey to deliver it. Then be strategic in the way you then go into the contestation. Don't fall into the trap of simply almost like going into a comfort zone, which is familiar territory, as evidenced by what the protagonists are doing. You must push yourself away from the comfort zone and deliberately and consciously take on strategies which mean that the chances of the protagonist winning are minimized in spite of them being better resourced than you are. If I may, and I don't mean to preempt your conversation, but I have understood that in the case of Zambia, the youth adopted a strategy they called the watermelon strategy. In other words, they appeared on this outside to be one thing and on the inside to be another thing. Because what they understood was that displaying what you are makes you actually weaker because you are giving away the game to the protagonist. Playing a camouflage game, i.e., I appear to be one thing and I'm something else, means the protagonist is lost as to what they are confronting. Because in an electoral process, the only thing that ultimately counts, maybe the only two things that count, are firstly, what you do when you're in the voting booth. It's a private matter and nobody else will know. So what you say outside is totally irrelevant in terms of what you do when you get into that voting booth. That's point number one. Point number two is clarity that you need to mobilize yourselves to protect that vote. If you do those things, I think that you'll find that the African continent will transform in a much shorter period than we've been led to believe hitherto. But I think it's in the hands of the youth because of your superiority in numbers, because of your access to tools that our generation actually is not mastered yet. It gives you huge advantages if you use your numbers, strategize, mobilize, take agency, and be clear about the journey, be clear about the objective. Where is the destination you're aiming at? If you do those things, I think you'll be surprised at what can happen and how quickly it can happen. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to open your deliberation, discussion, dialogue, and good luck, and I'm sure you'll come out in the right place. Maybe finally, let me just leave on the table a question for you. I get more and more worried when I get involved in dialogues with young people because I don't think there is necessarily clarity between election or political participation and the holding of political office. If you get time during the day, I would suggest that you actually try to address that issue very explicitly. The difference between participation and the holding political office and what the implications are. Good luck, and I'm sure it will be a productive day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moyo. Wise words. We really appreciate them. So yeah, that's a good way to start the conversation. And I've seen acknowledging all the various people, the Zambian Youth League, all from Malawi, SADC Youth, hi to everyone. So we'll just get started. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, so Honorable Romeo Kangombe. So when we had the idea to have this dialogue, I was actually in Zambia and had spoken to a few young people and asked them who would be an interesting person to talk about the experiences of young people in Zambia throughout the election from a political perspective. And they all suggested Honorable Romeo. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his views. And yeah, I think I'll just give the floor to you, Honorable Romeo. Can you hear us?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for according me this opportunity to have an interaction with you. I must confess that I'm deeply honored, and I count myself very lucky to find myself interacting with the young African leaders, I would say. My names are Romeo Lileko Kangombe, Member of Parliament for Sesheke constituency, a constituency that borders between Zambia, Namibia, and Angola. I'm 33 years of age and serving as the National Deputy Chairman for Mobilization and Strategy for the Party in Power. You may wish to know that my party, United Party for National Development, has been in opposition for 23 years, okay? 23 years, it's a long time to be in opposition. So during this period, we, some of us actually were still in school. Fortunately, we managed to join the party still in opposition, and we learned from the past experiences that our party made in the past. And it's out of those mistakes where we drew a lesson and came up with a strategy which, fortunately, by God's divine providence, has seen us forming government against a brutal regime. I, for one, have been arrested for 15 times, okay, in opposition. And my president has been arrested for 16 times by the old regime. But in all these situations, we drew very important lesson. Now, I'll go straight to the point. When you look at the Zambian population, the bigger number are the youths. And even the victory of the United Party for National Development into government has been necessary. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. It cut out for a bit.
Yeah, I must applaud and thank the youths of Zambia for showing patriotism, because patriotism is key in each and every election. We have two categories of people in the society: those that are well-to-do. Believe you me, those are not your target when it comes to an election, because they lack nothing. Now, the youth of Zambia, many of them are unemployed, and we packaged a message that is directly targeted to them, because they wanted change. The people of Zambia, through the youths, created a strategy, what is called watermelon. Green outside, as you can see, the fraction of the watermelon outside it's green, in the inside it's red. Now, our party in power at the time was a patriotic front whose color was green. And United Party for National Development, the color is red. So they would portray to be green on the outside because of the manner in which they were being treated by the regime at the time, just to deceive the regime, to camouflage their inner affiliation. Now, secondly, we looked at the polling station management, very important, because you cannot have an election without managing the polling station. In the polling station, you have targeted individuals. I can safely tell you today that even when we move into an election, I'll tell you that from this polling station, we are likely to get votes from, let's say, for example, if the total number of voters registered on that particular polling station is 500, I can safely tell you that we'll be able to get 450 or 400. Why? Because we have persons, managers that we have placed on each and every polling station to manage the polling station. Now, these are the people that know each and everyone within that polling district. And they're given responsibility to harness, to interact with those individuals prior to the elections. Where we have challenges, we move in and convince those individuals. Secondly, polling station will help you even offer vote protection. Vote protection in the sense that in the African politics, there's this phenomenon, which is very true, actually. Rigging is there. We have seen rigging. But when you have proper polling station management, it will be very, very difficult for the party in power to rig. Because each and everyone would have known all the voters. You know where this voter is coming from. You know even them by name, face, and whatnot. So it's very difficult to bring in foreign individuals to come and vote. So from polling station management, now comes the vote protection. The vote protection will help you to reinforce. I'll give you a very, very bad example. In the 2016 election, where the party in power at the time, the Patriotic Front, would evade the polling station and stuffing pre-marked ballot papers. Now, where you have polling station managers and people that have been put in place, more especially the youths, to reinforce the polling station, it would be very difficult for anyone to bring in pre-marked ballot papers and stuffing. So our youths were so vigilant in the previous election, such that any person who was going into a polling station was searched to ensure that they are not going in with a foreign material. Now, where you do not have polling station management, it's very difficult to harness and put all those things in place, because who will be responsible for that? No one. Apart from that, what we did was to target certain regions. I'll give you an example. If you have 10 ammunitions and you are going into war, it will be imperative for you to only aim at a specific target, so you don't shoot anywhere. It was very difficult for us to campaign. We are not given airspace. My president was given only 1 day per each province. You can imagine a province that has got maybe 16 constituencies, you are given 1 day to campaign in there. So what we did was to come up with a target. We looked at the areas where we're faring well. And those are the areas where we targeted and ensured we scaled up on the percentage. And we managed that. So even on other constituencies where we did not manage to get members of parliaments, you discover that my president, who is the president in power now, managed to garner more votes. Why? Because we had a specific target. Now, when we look at the terrain of African politics, where the incumbent, because of the illicit financial flows that they have indulged themselves into, would do whatever it takes to ensure that they remain in power. The best strategy can be drawn from what the youths of Zambia managed to execute on the 12th of February. Firstly, I strongly believe that in each and every country in Africa, the youths are the majority. And it's only important to make them realize that they ought to be patriotic for the future of the country and for their own good. Secondly, they ought to realize that there will definitely be nothing for them without them on the table. So for them to be part of the process, they have to be patriotic. They have to realize that whatever they do it for themselves, not for whoever that is vying to be the president. And the youth of Zambia managed to do that. I can safely tell you that the previous election, when we compared in terms of expenses, the money that we spent in the 2016 election and the 2021 elections, the 2021 elections, we spent less. We spent less by 15%. Now you can imagine that. Why? It's because we had a strong springboard to make the youths realize that the coming election is initially for them. Why? Because they are the majority, secondly, and they are the ones that suffer. Now, away from that, we need to realize that. Can you get me?
We can hear you now. You cut out, so you said we need to realize.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We need to realize that each region has got its own specific message. Each age group has got its own specific message. Now, we have seen politicians that only maintain the same message. I'll give you a practical example in my country. When you look at development in Lusaka province, which is the capital city, isn't the case in the rural province like Muchinga or Western province. So how you package your message also matters as a political party. What matters in the northern doesn't matter in the western. What matters in the northwestern doesn't matter in the eastern. So it's very important to do a thorough research on what really matters in each and every region. By so doing, you'll be able to package a message that is targeted to a certain individual in a particular region. Now, we've seen, I've drawn an example from Uganda, the past election in Uganda, where our brother, a youthful candidate, Bobi Wine, lost from the incumbent, Yoweri Museveni. I followed the campaigns every day, and these are one of the mistakes that I drew from there. Bobi Wine had a very, very, very good following. You can see even from his Facebook interactions that he's loved. But he never went completely on the ground to ensure that each and every vote is protected. He never ensured that each and every region has got a targeted message. He had only one message for change. Yes, you need change, but other regions need you to inspire them about that change. You need to tell them, especially on problems that are coming from that specific region. So you can talk about change, but if you don't inspire hope in that change, it will be very difficult for the people to realize that definitely if they gave you that platform, that change, you'll be able to sort out their problems. Now, in Zambia, we had unemployment high levels. The universities are floating about 30,000 graduates every year. And our message was very particular. The government cannot absorb all the graduates, but the government will be able to create a good environment, an enabling environment for those that are able to venture into entrepreneurial. And this we have done. In the previous government, our government used to release what we call Constituency Development Fund, that is intended to change the livelihood of people in a particular constituency. Now, we learned that many people in our constituencies are suffering. And as a way of creating a proper message that addresses their own issues was to increase the Community Development Fund from a 1.6 million kwacha to 25.7 million kwacha. Now, when you look at this figure is it's an increase of 1,500%. 1,500%. So already, you know that the people who you're giving that message, they get inspired and they see hope in the future. They see hope that if we give this party an opportunity to be in power, definitely we'll be able to benefit and our problems will be reduced. And this we have done, we have already delivered. By January 2022, each and every constituency will be able to receive the 25.7 million. Now, from the 25.7 million, you have a segment for the youth empowerment. You have a segment for the women empowerment. In there, you even have a segment for social welfare. Those that are unable to go to school, basically because they don't have the financial capacity. Now, we managed to come up with these strategies basically because we went on the ground and listened to the problems that the people are facing. And we couched this message and they listened. Now, if only this can be replicated in other areas, other countries, I strongly believe that political parties will be able to perform well in elections. I submit.
All right, thank you so much, Honorable Romeo. That was very powerful, very informative. Definitely learned a lot about that, about clear strategy and protecting the votes of, especially of young people and people across the continent. So thank you very much for that. So we'd like to maybe hand the floor over to Dr. Matthew Aibakuro. So Dr. Matthew has written, well, what brought him to this, why we selected him as a speaker is because he has written extensively about Zambia's election and whether that would make sense if it is actually transferable to other parts of the continent. So he's based in West Africa, and I think that will be a good perspective to consider. Like, yes, this works, and congratulations to the Zambian youth, and we're all inspired by that, but can we also transfer that? Can we transfer that to our own context? So I'm in South Africa right now. Would it make sense? We've had a 20% or just above 20% youth participation in elections this time around. So yeah, I think I'll just give the floor to Dr. Matthew. Are you ready, Dr. Matthew?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. This has been really exciting so far. And I must say that when I was invited to this session, I was very excited about listening to our friends from Zambia to talk about the practicalities of their experience, even more than contributing on my own. And the presentation so far has been quite interesting, perhaps a lot more lessons than I had seen from just reading about the elections from Nigeria. I think the question I'm supposed to address is whether the lessons from Zambia are transferable to other regions. And I'm pretty sure the answer is obvious. This is possible. But as I thought about this, I just kept thinking about so many conditions that needs to be right, that needs to come together pre-election day, on election day, to have this sort of change we're talking about. Now, while the differences of young people across this continent might differ, the way they experience political participation and their daily challenges for a better life are quite similar in a number of ways. Now, the question is, how then can we replicate the sort of broader political and democratic change to make sure that young people become meaningful participants in the political process, but also are able to bring about the ultimate change that that participation is supposed to bring about. And as I look at a number of experiences, some of which the Member of Parliament from Zambia has already mentioned, so I'm just going to point to about 6 key factors I think will be expedient if we're able to, or would be able to transfer these lessons from Zambia to some other regions and countries in Africa. I'm just going to run through them as quick as possible. The first is what I refer to as the fact that democratic ideals must serve as a foundation for electoral participation. I think the conversation today is about political participation, but broader democratic ideals across various countries, like respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, transparency in governance, accountability for public officials from the highest level to the lowest levels, inclusion of young people, women, persons with disabilities in political processes, whether it's at the national level, at the state level, or at whatever levels of governance, is going to be really important. And when we talk about this sort of participation, we're talking about both the length of the participation, but also the breadth of it. So it's not just about getting people to sit across a room or have young people appointed into political spaces. It's also about the depth of that participation. So what sort of meaningful effect are they making within those spaces that you have put them? And if we do not have this sort of all-encompassing democratic ideals serving as a foundation of society, then just having political participation at the top of it would not bring about the sort of change that we have seen in Zambia. The second is not underestimating the importance of aggregative and incremental change. Now, as young people, we live in the social media age. Somebody releases a song and becomes a superstar, makes all the money, and we are drawn to immediate and dramatic change. Somebody releases an app and gets billions, and we all just want to have that level of immediate change. It works a bit different in the political space. As we heard from the first speaker, they've been in opposition in Zambia for 20-something years, which means that we might be talking about change that happened immediately a few months ago, but this has been a long time coming, and we have to understand that for us to have that immediate change, we must look at aggregative change that happens in different spaces, but also about incremental change. So make sure that we look at what needs to be done before the next action needs to be done, before you then get to the level of results that you're looking at achieving. I mean, a good example of this is Nigeria, where I think one of my friends and colleagues from Yaga Africa is on the call. And for a lot of years, there was a huge campaign for the Not Too Young to Run bill that was able to reduce the the age for contesting for positions across Nigeria. And once that was achieved, it has now provided a foundation for the broader change that we believe that young people would be able to have in terms of holding political office. So it's about understanding the importance of valuing incremental and aggregative change over just immediate change, which would not happen in most cases when it comes to the political space. The third is about understanding the long-term significance of youth participation. So we have to try to see youth participation as just not one of victories, not just one election. It has to be a case of sustained advocacy and action for change over a long period of time. When I was reading about the Zambian elections, it was interesting to find that the current president won on his 6th bid for presidency. That is contesting 5 times and failing and keeping on with the pressure until he won on the 6th bid. Our current president in Nigeria, by the time he won in 2015, had contested 3 times and failed and only won on his 4th bid. So we have to understand that this sort of political participation and change arising from it has to be sustained over time. There has to be that long-term view of it. And I think the first speaker that opened today's dialogue referred to this a bit when he talked about the difference between political participation and political leadership. We have to understand that for us to get to bring young people into positions, we have to understand it has to be built on the foundation of political participation. People have to be part of these processes from the grassroots level to regional levels to national levels, and do this over a long period of time to ensure that we are able to get this change. The fourth quick factor is about solidarity. Our continent, Africa, is big. Our heritage is quite diverse. But as I said at the beginning, young people face similar challenges in terms of electoral and democratic participation. Now, while the opportunities to engage will differ, there is much to be gained by adding our voices to the actions of young people in other countries whenever the opportunity and need arises. In Nigeria, we did see the level of solidarity we found when the NSAS movement did get on board last year. But it's not just about that. We've seen campaigns in different parts of the world get that level of solidarity from young people in other places. And that adds to the momentum, that adds to the pressure for the different systems that you want to change, to understand that this goes beyond just the geographical confines of a particular country, but actually means a lot for people around the world. And in any case, there is a very strong motivational feeling in knowing that you are not alone and that young people in a particular country are not just alone, but there is a solidarity from people across the world. And that is really important in terms of how people are able to sustain drivers of change, both in the political space, but also in terms of broader social change. Finally, we have to get the job done. And this is really important. Getting change, I'm sorry to use these examples again, but it's not like having an economic opportunity and just making money or being discovered by a football team and getting stardom immediately. Political change happens within a very complex mix of economic, social, political factors. And for you to be able to change things that have been entrenched in systems over time is not going to be an easy work. And we have to make sure that as young people, we are ready to get the job done, but we are doing it in a way that's appropriate to the context. And a very important lesson I took from listening to the first speaker is how to be able to tailor campaign strategies and tailor activities. And he was quite specific in what they did to bring about this change. But you have to get the job done, but make sure you're doing it in a way that's appropriate to the particular context. We did read about some of the security challenges that young people face before the elections, threats to shut down the internet. And all of this means that we have to be sure that for us to get this change, we are ready to put in the work, the hours that is required for organizing and making all of this done. In conclusion, so I would say that the very important factor for today's session is that we're actually discussing a situation that shows that this change is actually possible and listening to people that have been able to do it. And I'm very sure there are many other persons participating to this dialogue from different countries who are doing the same thing in their very regions. And to just wrap this up on a positive note, the indicators and circumstances for bringing about real democratic change for young people actually point in one direction, and that is northwards. Zambia is actually the 17th opposition victory since 2015 in Africa, which means that we are seeing a lot of change. The dictatorial tendencies that define Africa are actually changing over time, and that creates opportunity. There's increased awareness and education for young people. The positive impact of social media and social and political mobilization will only increase over time. And continental and global solidarity also means that there is a real push for us and an opportunity for young people in Africa to bring about political change in our various countries. In a way, the trends show that youth-driven change is inevitable as long as we are ready to put in the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthew, for that. I agree. I think that it's a good perspective to think that these things don't happen overnight, but we have to commit, and we have to commit like over time and consistently, and that's the way that change is going to come on the continent. And it's also good to hear the positive note that there is change. The indicators do point to change on the continent. So thank you very much for that, and that perspective from West Africa, from Nigeria, very helpful and very important. So our next speaker is Ms. Nyasha Gorodema, and she'll be giving the perspective as someone who is in opposition and participates in electoral and political participation. And yeah, I think that and she's a young woman who will have a good perspective on whether this would work in the neighbors or one perspective in the neighbors of Zambia in Zimbabwe? Can we transfer some of these lessons? I know we have a lot of Zimbabweans from various political parties or even in the individual capacity. So we're really looking forward to your perspective and also your responses in the open discussion. So Nyasha, are you ready? Can I give the floor to you?
Yes, can you all hear me and see me?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me. I feel very honored to be considered in this discussion. The subject and focus of my presentation is whether the Zambian strategy was effective in Zimbabwe and where Zimbabweans may have failed. What I intend to do is to walk you through the context of Zimbabwe and Zambia, and how mostly everything, I think, from my perspective, watching the campaigning and elections, seems to pivot on civil society. So I've divided my presentation and discussion into 4 main quotes that will surmise my discussion points. The first one that I have for you is, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. I think the most inspiring aspect that we got from Zambia was how the Zambian youth basically went with a straightforward demand and said what they wanted, and what they wanted was very much indicated throughout in a unified voice. But first, I'd like to go through how each country went to the polls. From the neighboring perspective, we saw Zambia go to the polls in the middle of a debt crisis. We saw them go to the polls in the middle of a global pandemic and through an authoritarian regime that was clamping hard on opposition and on young people. And we also saw the incumbent that was there campaign with an infrastructure message of how they're refurbishing roads and so forth. And Zimbabweans, we saw Zambians defiantly reject that and say the proper thing that needs to be addressed is joblessness, the rising prices of basic commodities, which they thought were pressing issues that needed to be addressed. And what we saw was that young people were shaping the electoral conversation because they were talking about goals that young people resonate with, such as social equality, personal freedom, quality of life, and a call for jobs. And all of these were being espoused in the electoral conversation of Zambia. As for Zimbabwe's context as to how we went to the polls in 2018 was very, very, very different. First and famously, we had a military coup, whereas those who like to soft pedal positions were referred to as a military-assisted transition. Zimbabweans collectively cheered for this, celebrated as military personnel ushered in this transition, and the now current president assumed office. Now, I'd just like to put to the audience that when you've been marching en masse for a military transition and for a ruling party replacement, to then marching in change for an opposition to take the helm of power barely half a year later, I think in retrospect, that proved to be much too jarring for the Zimbabwean youth psyche who fully participated. And psychologists will call it a cognitive dissonance. And I think that's probably what happened to Zimbabweans in large, and explains how we eventually mobilized and how we took part in our elections. We failed to come up with a singular goal like the Zambians did in 2021. I mean, we had no natural currency, high unemployment too, dilapidated public infrastructure, the same authoritarian type of regime, but that didn't coalesce into one goal. And this is where the crux of my discussion pivots, which is the role of civil society organizations. I mean, I believe that they shape the discourse. I think they helped create the watermelon effect that we saw in Zambia. And this brings me to my second quote to surmise that, which is, I think the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Zambians showed no endurance to that. They got together, they mobilized, they sensitized themselves to voter registration. The civil society fielded a large group of different organizations to conduct these voting exercises. There were concise and hard-hitting narratives that we saw here in Zimbabwe. We saw the youth say, I am voting for my job. We saw poems from youth leaders from SIPE talk about better quality of life. We saw that there was partnership with the Electoral Commission and Restless Development Zambia to carry on the conversation about polls. We saw that the youth were so inspired that they bypassed state regulations on the internet by using VPNs to continue to mobilize. We saw Zambian women and youth make manifestos and present them to presidential candidates. And we saw the youth collectively stand up. And in the end, all the groups effortlessly united in the prevailing narrative that the UPND was setting up, which then resulted in protecting the vote. So summarily, what did the Zambian youth do? I think they did 8 fantastic things. They participated in continuous registration exercises. They registered as members of political parties, which is youth political participation. They created movements. They mobilized. They sensitized themselves to the election. They avoided being caught up in stories of the older generation, such as the ethnic debates we've seen plague Zambia. Whereas, for example, the young people in Zimbabwe allowed themselves to get caught up in ruling party squabbles that resulted in the military-assisted transition. We saw the main opposition, the UPND, do substantial voter education and hone in a message. We saw young polling agents. We saw parallel voter tabulation. And consequentially, due to this organization and coherence, we saw outside observers who were observing the election take their cue from the local observers that were actually on the ground. But in Zim, this is where we actually failed. It must be noted that in Zimbabwe, there are no outfits for parallel voter tabulation, unlike in Zambia. In fact, CSOs really do not have any space. They're seen as political opposition. They're always given a side eye when they delve into electoral processes or anything that is remotely political. Our organizations and main opposition also did very little to unify a narrative that would coalesce the young people on quality of life. Yes, there was sensitization to voting and registration, but the goals that young people aligned themselves with, such as social equality and personal freedom, were not overly focused as they were in Zambia. They instead focused on arbitrary law, electoral reforms, law and order, and values that political scientists may say resonate with older generations. So what then happened in Zimbabwe is young people felt a partisan gap. They felt like they weren't properly represented. And what I think could have been done better and what we can learn now is that they could have gone more digital. As the mobile connection in Zimbabwe is quite high. We saw the Zambians mobilize digitally for that watermelon effect. They could have become more in tandem with the civil societies, as Zambia was, with the whole voice of pro-democracy groups. And this is why, in the end, many Zimbabwean youths were discouraged in engaging in risky collective action, which was to become polling agents of the such. And this is why the vote was barely secured, but it was in Zambia. So what can then be said for Zambia is that, as political scientists agree, poor incumbent performance on job creation compared with other socioeconomic issues increases the likelihood of the youth to express affinity to the opposition. And this is where the UPND really pounced in. Whereas for Zimbabwe, and I think this is a very important context to really understand, youth, unlike older voters, they tend to vote less the longer an incumbent party has been in office. Our ruling party has been in power for 40 years in Zimbabwe, whilst Zambia has enjoyed some transitions of peaceful transitions of power in its 56 years since independence. I think most famously, Dr. Kawunda's one-party state to Dr. Chiluba. I mean, that culture is there. As a Zimbabwean, I'm quite envious of that. We've only seen one aspect of the ruling party. So I think that brings about now my third quote, which is, election rigging has a ceiling. When young people come together and vote and turn out, which turned out to be, I believe, 70% in Zambia, it becomes very difficult for any sort of rigging to take place, and the vote is secured. And this is to also play into the voter tabulation that they did. They secured that vote. And in the end, the Electoral Commission played it straight because everyone was saying one tune in an organized voice. Whereas in Zimbabwe, our Electoral Commission played it questionably. There was strong men here, strong man there, populist promise there, populist promise there, someone doing the right thing there, someone doing something else there. It wasn't organized. And this brings me to my last presentation, which is, Africa needs strong institutions and not strong men. I would like to and say to the youth that these institutions are within us. We can build those strong institutions. We don't have to be told by party leaders and so forth. And Zambia showcased this all the way down to the ordinary person. And the actual electoral commissions then ended up playing straight and organizing to that voice. And what then happened in Zimbabwe is the people, the parties, and the civil society were not in sync. So this goes to show that when you're not in tandem with the civil society. You've lost the plot with the people. And ultimately, this is where I believe Zimbabweans failed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyasha, for that, that perspective from Zimbabwe. I think something that really came out is the need to emphasize like building strong, sorry, my internet, yeah. So I think one of the things that really came out, I think, was the building of the strong, instead of building strong people, rather build stronger institutions. I think that was a very strong point, as well as the points about like election rigging. We know that, you know, it's a phenomena that happens on the continent, but how far can they really go? At what point, like, where, you know, where's the ceiling for that? So thank you so much for that perspective. So we are, I believe, 4 minutes over time. I hope that's okay with participants. But yeah, I'll give the floor to our final speaker, who is Relebohile Fojane, and she is representing SEOF. And yeah, so she's going to be giving perspectives from a marginalized people's perspective. So how can we improve political participation for marginalized groups, for women, for people with disabilities in governance and elections? So Relebohile, can I give the floor to you?
Thank you very much, Tidi. And it's been great also listening to the previous speakers on very insightful discussions. And as Tidi has mentioned, that I will be, discussing on the way forward with increasing participation of women and persons with disability in governance and in elections. Firstly, I want to emphasize that all people who have the nationality of a country are called citizens. All citizens have the right to say how their country must be run. And this means that they have political rights. Women and persons with disability should not be an exception, and they cannot be an exception. About 80 million people in Africa have disabilities. And it's very unfortunate that there is still a low participation of PWs in elections, thereby resulting in low engagement of decision-making platforms and policy development. The same goes as well for women. They form almost 50% of our population. But the progress with their inclusion in governance, or rather in key political areas, amounts roughly to 30%. And in order for us as Africa to say, we have this continent that is inclusive, it means that we have to increase the speed at which we work towards increasing the participation of these marginalized communities, and also come up with key strategies. Before we come to key strategies, I'll firstly outline some of the hindering factors to political and governance of participation of persons with disabilities. As we know, in most African countries, there is poor infrastructure, especially in the rural areas. And this means that there is inaccessible polling stations. For instance, persons who use wheelchairs for mobility, some of them can be hindered. When you get to the polling stations, at some rural areas, there are no sign language interpreters in order to be able to assist this community to be able to have it easy when electing. And as a result, this demotivates them. Another issue is lack or inaccessible information. Our world is becoming more digital. And with us advancing towards the digital space, it means that some of persons with disability, they are left out. So that's also another key issue to take in consideration. Another point that I want to highlight is the issue of being economically disadvantaged. Majority of persons with disability form part of the poorest community because of lack of skills and because of lack of skills, and also they are not easily employed. Some employers think it's expensive to employ persons with disability, and that is quite a problem as well. And then lastly, I want to emphasize on the issue of stigma and discrimination. There is internalized stigma and induced stigma. Internalized stigma comes from the people with disabilities themselves, because they have been so marginalized that for them to take a bold step and say that I will be a forerunner, a front runner, it takes a lot of courage. And that is made worse by the induced stigma from societies, and of course, lack of policies that include them. So the issue of stigma and discrimination should also be highly taken into consideration. Now that I have highlighted the issues, what could be the way forward? I always say that the youth are innovative. We have solutions. So some of the ways that we can try to improve their participation is to ensure that during times of elections, we have trained supervisors who understand the different needs of persons with disability. For instance, I highlighted the issue of sign language interpreters. Also, the issue of the infrastructure, the environment that is friendly, and also to the communities. Let's not get weary in doing good. If your sister who cannot go to a voting station by themselves cannot go alone, please go with them, because they have a right to voice out their needs as a citizen as well. Another recommendation could be with adjustment of policies. For instance, Kenya is one of the countries that has passed on an act for persons with disabilities, whereby they were emphasizing that at least there should be 5% of job vacancies for persons with disability. South Africa as well also passed the Employment Equity Act, which it was requiring that organizations should ensure that people with disabilities make up at least 2% of the workforce. I believe most African countries can also adapt to that. Again, policies are good, but accountability is important. In as much as we have set policies, but it's important that we account and we continue to work towards the enactment of those policies. And lastly, the education intervention. It's important that persons with disabilities get opportunities for education. For instance, in the SADC Youth Forum, the Southern Africa Youth Forum, in our disability committee, we have launched the Southern Africa Youth Champions for Albinism agenda. And part of what we want to do there is to be able to raise an education fund that will be able to support persons with albinism. As the SADC Youth Forum, we have already started to become part of the solution. And we also call forth other organizations to continue to ensure that there is education for persons with disability. And then, now that we have, said a lot about persons with disability, I'd like to move to the second group, women, our mothers, those who are able to raise kings and queens. Why we also need them included in governance and in elections. However, I'd first want to highlight the gaps that hinder them. There are attitudes and stereotypes in Africa, and most African countries are patriarchal. The final say is that of a man. So it wouldn't make sense for some places when a woman is campaigning for a presidential position, because the society is not used to a woman being a front runner. So it's up to us to continue to raise campaigns as well, whereby we educate our communities that leadership is not just about our gender, but it's about the ability to solve problems, to inspire, and to be able to take a nation to another place. And I believe women are well capable. There are lots of examples. And then secondly, with regards to women, the challenge is that as well, the political space is not a friendly environment, not just for women, but even for men. There's a lot of hate speech, and women, sometimes they shy away to come into such masculine environments. So in order for us as well to be able to move forward, we have to work on the environment to ensure that our environment is able to cater for women and also for persons with disability. According to the United Nations Afrobarometer survey, they showed that women feel a sense of vulnerability to political intimidation and violence. But then, what I want to say, call upon those women who feel like they can make a difference, is that no one can tell your story better than you. So as a woman, you have to be involved. You are the one who knows gender-based violence. You are the one who knows the burden of unemployment. So take up space and be part of the solution. And then lastly, it's a matter of economic emancipation for women. When a woman is economically empowered, decision-making does not become a challenge. So I call upon decision makers, heads of states, private sectors, organizations to say, let's empower these communities. And in conclusion, it takes two to tango, or rather let me say, how can two work together unless they agree? In as much as the government is working towards mobilization of resources, empowerment, adjustment of policies, but it's also upon women and persons with disability to say that I am well able and I'm ready to grab an opportunity that is given unto me, and I will be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Relebohile, for that very necessary perspective on how to increase political participation, or rather the state of political participation among marginalized groups, women and people with disabilities, but also strategies or ways to improve that. So we are now approaching or heading into our exciting part, which is the opportunity for participants, like an open discussion for participants from all over the continent to share their views, share their perspectives. I've seen a lot in the chat, and we will be sharing these. But if you would like to participate in it, please either raise your hand, or if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A box. Just a heads up though, Honorable Romeo has been summoned in Parliament, but he will remain on the call. So if you do have any questions for him, please do write them down and or put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and then we will eventually get to them. So I see two hands. I believe that Liadi Yusuf was first.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Yusuf Liadi from Nigeria, and I want to appreciate the organizer of this dialogue, and also want to give a regards to one of my boss, Dr. Matthew, for the invitation. And I don't have much to say because we have a brilliant speaker. We have been speaking for a very long time, and I enjoyed their presentation. Well, just want to put one or two things to portray the point. You know, like what the last speaker mentioned, that before we can provide a solution to the youth political participation, we need to first understand and outline the problem when the young people are facing, and then when we are able to provide a solution at the major problem the young people are facing, then it will make the job easy for us to get them involved in political processes. And one of the problems is economic instability. You know, majorly all the African countries are facing this unemployment rate, and we need to find a solution to this. You know, if as a youth, if you don't have something doing, you don't have something financially, it will be difficult for you to get involved in leadership. And even if you find your way to get involved and get to the political leadership, you will rather be thinking on how to use it to fetch money than making impact. So we need to work toward creating a sustainable economy. Then we have a solution to this. And the second one is neglected of the youth and in government. For a very long time, youth are being set aside and they are not feel among, and these are being a kind of is not giving them that a kind of priority in government. So the fair minority, they don't feel they have any power, and this neglected of the youth in government, it makes some of us to lose interest in getting involved and getting closer to them. So we don't want to know, we don't want to be relating with them, and we don't want to be partaking in decision-making process. And the last layer on the problem is lack of trust and access to information in government. We have lost hope. We have lost hope for a very long time. So we need to find a way to revive this hope, and also we need to find a channel for a prompt information. When you are feel among and you are getting the prompt information, this can boost your capacity, and it can boost your involvement in policy. So and the solution to this in YIP Nigeria, we have an approach. We have an approach, and the first one is education. We need to find a way to educate our people. Before you get involved in policy, what are the things you need to know relating to political participation? What are the things you need to know relating to a leadership, and for you personally to build yourself? We don't want a leader without a right orientation. So we should work toward enlightening and orientate our youth on what politics is all entails. And the second one is empowerment. It's most necessary. At least before you get involved in political processes, you must have something doing. You must empower yourself physically, and you must develop your skills. So we have a lot of access to technology, so that a lot of online courses you can take to develop your skills and also get yourself empowered. And the last one is engagement. There's a very large gap between the citizen and the government. So we need to find a way of bridging this gap. When the citizen will have a sense of belonging in government and also have a room to deliberate and to complain about what they are facing. If you don't have an access to someone, how will you be dreaming of becoming such a person in future? So if if you have access to a government office, from there, you can be thinking of yourself, you want to be in this office on some days, and also you'll be working toward it. And we have been working tirelessly in Nigeria, and like what Dr. Matthew mentioned, especially on the NSAS movement, has opened our eyes to many things and to know the real power that hiding under the power of the youth. And we are working on having this and turning this social movement of NSAS to political movement toward the 2023 election. So thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the platform.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, for those perspectives from Nigeria. Very informative and support what Dr. Matthew was saying. So up next, we have Hein. Hein, are you ready to speak?
Good day, can you hear me?
So we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so number one, Romeo. So guys, I'm gonna come in with like a holistic perspective. So we are on a continent with 56 countries, and we understand what the energy and the vision was for decolonization. And then the AU was founded in 1963, and today we have Agenda 2063. So if that can just be the basis of my interrogation. With Romeo, I would basically want to ask him, he mentioned Bobby Wine. And there's some research that points out how Bobby Wine is kind of compromised in the sense that he works with certain global capitalist forces, you know, big corporate elites and their lawyers. Even the lawyer that defended him in America is a well-known a global crap, we call them. So me, I'm coming from a school of thought that is pan-African and socialistic. We are very much against neoliberal policy. So I want to ask Romeo, what does he think of that? Because he did mention illicit. Hello, Blake. So yellow. He did mention illicit financial flows. Sorry, I'm in a class. Then my question to the gentleman from Nigeria would be the issue around SARS and okay. Hello. So my question to the gentleman from Nigeria is around SARS and also, you know, the economy of Nigeria, how it's not really sovereign, you know, it's not really, yeah, stuff like that, and how multi-corporations are still operating within that space and creating inequalities through neoliberal economic paradigms. You know, we know our second biggest economy, you know, our Nigerian brothers and sisters, yeah, they're very much about the hustle. Then for Zim, yeah, like guys, there was an issue around, we know the internal party politics, the people who didn't want Grace to be the next leadership of the ZANU-PF. We also know that MDC has a history of, you know, being consulting with British politicians, consulting with Blair, you know, there's that research and intelligence around MDC and the mission of MDC. So once again, I want to question there around neoliberalism, you know, and how Africa is still in a limbo. We are totally de-linked from colonial capitalism, and you know how our leaders have been struggling to get out of that. And then we had the structural adjustment programs that happened with the Washington Consensus, how that messed up our countries, messed up them, messed up SADC regions, messed up a lot of countries, you know, with the IMF and the structural adjustment policies, whereby the civil service had to be chopped up. There had to be rates on water, electricity, you know. That's what IMF implemented, and that basically put us deeper into underdevelopment. There's studies around this. Our economies actually shrank after IMF implemented their structural adjustment program. So once again, you know, all of these contestations within our societies, we do not see this thing. And with so I would just like some people that are studying the African continent and wanting to be aware, it would be great if the leadership can just give can.
Okay, thank you. I think he cut out. I think Hein cut out. I believe he's based in South Africa. So if we, Honorable Romeo might be able to answer this later, but if we don't, we've written down the question so that he can answer at a later stage. So can we please give the floor to Decent? But before that, if you had your hand up and you had a chance to speak, please lower it. And also, can you please, when you introduce yourself, when you start, please let us know where you're from so we can understand that context. And yeah, and if you can also keep it brief so that everyone can get an opportunity. Okay, so I think Decent is up next.
Okay, thank you so much, Sidi. And thank you for the platform. I think it gives us an opportunity to reflect broadly on the elections and Africa in general. Mine will come in as just maybe a comment to say, Zambia has created a culture of democratic change, a culture of leadership change, whether it's change for good or it's change for bad. Given that we are in the African continent, we appreciate their efforts that they've been making changes. Here and there, their changes have not been for good, but we are giving them enough benefit of the doubt that this is their change for good. Since the 1991 move from President Kaunda to President Chiluba, you have had this successive change of leadership after every 10 or 15 years, the first 15 and then the successive 10 terms. So I think they are doing well also in terms of changing, one, the president of the country. Secondly, in terms of changing the ruling party itself, I think they are doing well. We can learn so much from them. However, I am decent and I'm from Zimbabwe. Sorry for not introducing myself at the beginning while we had said so. The Zimbabwean context, as was presented earlier, I heard Nyasha also speaking about it. But I think there is an omission, particularly on the strength of state institutions and their role, their partisan role in determining who becomes the winner of the elections. Whether you look at it from the angle of the coup, some people call it the military-assisted transition, or you look at it from the angle of the electoral management bodies, and then now the manipulation of civil society's operations through the new laws that are coming. We now have a PVO Act, Private and Voluntary Organizations Act. We have a patriotic bill, which is coming, and we're expecting that it will be passed by February next year. All these things indicate that civil society is doing its best to try to create an environment where everyone can operate, and the ruling party is against it, and the state institutions are against those. My point being that some of the things that are theoretically sound when it comes to broad political participation in Zimbabwe, when it comes to issues of practice, they may not be as clear or as obvious as it is once you get to understand the theory. In some instances, theory, once you understand it, then you move to practice, it comes out as you expect. But with respect to Zimbabwe, it is not like that, particularly because of the capture of private state institutions by the ruling party under the presidency of the late Robert Mugabe, which has changed now. What we now have is the capture of the ruling party itself by these institutions. The ruling party is captured by the military. The ruling party is captured by a capital. The ruling party is captured by some Eastern European mafias. So in this case, it makes it impossible to come out with adequate theories to understand exactly what is happening. That is why the most common and the most constant feature of political participation and change in Zimbabwe becomes violence, abuse, theft, and so forth. Because from the non-theories of what has to happen and does not have to happen, the political landscape is too dynamic to identify trends. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Decent. Very necessary perspectives from Zimbabwe, from the neighbors, and a good response about the practical implications of Nyasha's presentation. So thank you for that. So up next, we have Joseph. Joseph, can you hear us? Are you ready to go? And please tell us where you're from.
Okay. My name is Joseph Swartz from Namibia. I'm currently in the Landless People's Movement under the Youth Command element. I would just like to add on the topic of youth approach to politics as a whole. Concerning Namibia, you see, alongside our famous individualism, there is another ingredient in the Namibian soccer. I think that a belief that we are all connected as one people. Because if there is a child in a remote area who can't read, that matters to me, but even if it's not my child. If there is a senior citizen who can pay for their prescription drugs, that matters to me, even if it's not my grandparent. It is that fundamental belief that I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, that makes this country work. And even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us, who embrace the politics of anything goes. And that has been common in African countries nowadays. So I say to them now, because there is not a Tswana Republic of Namibia,
Sorry, Joseph, I believe you're cutting out.
Only
Okay,
the
now we
Republic
can
of
hear you.
Namibia. So the elite sorry. In a Damara state and a Bamboo state. So we are one people because all of us are pledging our allegiance to the Republic of Namibia, all of us defending the Republic of Namibia. So in the end, that's what this elections is about. Do we participate in politics of cynicism, or do we participate in a politics of hope? Hope in the face of difficulty, hope in the face of uncertainty. So we as young people should not allow ourselves to be corroded like cattle by these politicians, because we should have this sense of belonging, because despite making up more than half of the population in many countries, young people often find themselves marginalized from mainstream politics and decision making. They struggle to gain the respect of public officials and are seen as lacking the skills and experience and experience to engage in political activity and lead positive change in their communities. So this exclusion, combined with limited educational and economic opportunities can leave young people both idle and frustrated with the status quo. So today's youth need real opportunities to participate in political processes and contribute to practical solutions that advance development. So when given an opportunity to organize, to voice their opinions and play a meaningful role in political decision making, young people consistently demonstrate their willingness and ability to foster positive, lasting change. So they also become more likely to demand and defend democracy and gain a greater sense of belonging, as democracy is just a guise in most of African countries, because we can claim that we are democratic while we are not. Thank you.
No, very powerful sentiments from Namibia. Thank you so much, Joseph. So up next we have Lexina. Lexina, are you prepared to talk? If you can unmute yourself.
Okay, my name is Lexina Maika Mvola from Zambia. I would like to say big ups to Romeo for that perspective from the Zambian context. I just want to mention that I'm a youth that works with an organization that promotes participation of young people. My organization is called Center for Young Leaders in Africa. And what we do is to ensure that we promote the participation of young people across the various decision-making levels that we have as a country. But what I would like to mention is that drawing from our elections that have just have passed and brought in a new change, a new government, we as young people have been working also to ensure that the limited positions that are there in our current electoral system change, promoting what we are calling a mixed member electoral system, which will mean that we would have to overhaul our entire electoral system, because currently Zambia has a majoritarian kind of electoral system, which is first past the post. And we have seen that the system has not been able to give us that opportunity and that platform for more inclusion of the marginalized groups that have been mentioned, the persons with disabilities, the youth, and the women. And with this proposed system that we are trying to promote, we want to ensure that we have at least a reserved number of seats in parliament for youth, for women, and for persons with disabilities. So we are in talks, and hopefully that Romeo is going to be one of our champions in terms of calling for the inclusion and the participation for young people. One other thing I would like to mention from an African perspective is it is important for us to call for these platforms, but it is also imperative for us to make ourselves ready for these positions when the opportunity comes. It is one thing, for example, in Zambia, to say as a youth, I want to participate, but you have so many restrictive systematic barriers that make you as a young person not able to participate. For example, your level of education currently, you need to have a matric or you need to have a grade 12 certificate for you to be able to aspire, even become a member of parliament. But when you look at our educational statistics, how many young people do have those documents for them to be able to even want to become leaders? So once we deal with some of these systematic barriers, we are able then to have more young people, more women, and more persons with disabilities sitting at the decision-making table. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that very necessary reflection on taking Relebuhile's talk about women and marginalized groups, women and people with disabilities, and how that reflects in the Zambian context, and really how Zambia has done very well. The youth of Zambia have done very well in this current election, but that's also a good point to see like what could work better in future, like how we can improve that. So next.
Thank you so much. I'm Malembeka Jonathan, the Vice President for Political and Administration from a youth organization called Zambian Youth League here in Zambia. I just want to highlight a few things that really necessitated the victory of the UPND government, especially taking into account that the youths turned out in large numbers to make this change. One of the things that made the UPND win this election was the sympathy votes. What I mean by sympathy vote is that the previous regime brutalized the UPND government when it was in opposition. So the youths had that sympathy when they looked at the sufferings of the opposition party. So there was that sympathy vote that turned out in large numbers. And also the other thing that attracted the youths to vote in large numbers is the message that the UPND government had. They were not personal, they were not propagating the agenda of attacking individuals, but they had a specific message for the youth, such as education. They promised that we are going to offer free education to the Zambian youths. And you know, the youths are the majority that are pursuing education. So that message appealed very well to the young population about the message of free education. And also the UPND, when they were in opposition, they promised job creation and employment and the creation of industries, and also to boost the economy. So we find that most youths, they are the ones that are unemployed. Most youths, they are the ones that are not in employment. So that message resonated very well with the young population when they realized that actually our vote means employment, it means free education, it means an end to poverty. And also when you look at the slogan that the UPND had, it resonated very well with the youths because the young people, because of the brutal regime that they were there, so they were unable to identify themselves with one symbol. They were carrying two symbols. The right-hand side, they were using the Patriotic Front symbol, which is a fist. And the left-hand side, they were using the stretch arm, which is the symbol for UPND, which is forward. So what the youths were saying is that they were saying the right hand, when they lift the right hand, they will say this right hand is just used to get whatever the PF is giving out, the handouts like the money, the regalia and everything. But the left hand, it was a demonstration that this is what we are going to use for voting. So you find that the PF, when they were campaigning, they didn't really understand what was going on, because the voters disguised themselves with two symbols. That's why you saw even the issue of the watermelon coming in. And also the UPND engaged the youths in certain parts of the country, like in the Copper Belt, where I'm hailing from. You find that very young girls and boys were engaged to take part in these campaigns. Others were as foot soldiers, others in the security wing of the UPND political party. So you find that this engagement of the youths, it appealed very well to the young voters, because when a young person sees a fellow young person carrying out or spreading out the message to them, then they welcome that message, because the young people were engaged other than the elderlies. And also when you look at the cost of living has been it was very high. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can, perfectly.
Oh, thank you very much. Also, the cost of goods in Zambia under the PF regime, the prices skyrocketed because of the exchange rate, the kwacha and the dollar. It was just something else. So this also is something that made the previous government to lose this election. And the Patriotic Front government, though they built a lot of health infrastructures like hospitals and clinics, but something was missing. There were no drugs in the hospitals. There were no drugs in the clinics. So from that someone is sick of malaria, they go to a clinic, they cannot find medicine. Like in my area, I witnessed one boy in the age of 15 dying of malaria in this generation, because when the parents took that child to the hospital, there was no medicine. They brought that baby back to the village and the boy died like that. So even though the Patriotic Front was claimed to have done a lot of infrastructure development, but the services were lacking, such as the medicines. And they were intolerant. This was not welcome by the youths. And also there's something I want to share to this group quickly. This is the first time when Zambia allowed prisoners to vote. And you know that when you go to the Zambian prison, the majority of inmates are the youths. And you know, youths are inmates and prisoners, they live under very bad conditions. So when prisoners were allowed to vote, it's obvious that almost all the inmates that voted, who are the youth, they voted for the opposition, the UPND. So the ruling party miscalculated. They thought if they allowed the prisoners to vote, they will be able to manipulate the prisoners and get these votes. But alas, it worked against them. And the one thing the UPND also used, they used what we call the leverage. They were leveraging on the strength of the Patriotic Front. The Patriotic Front, the strength, they had a lot of resources. They were money, they were giving money, they were giving regalia. So what the UPND did was to turn out the strength of the PF to be viewed as wicked. For example, when they were giving out the money, they'll say, look, because these people are corrupt, they have stolen money, so get their money, but don't vote for them. So what the PF thought were their strength, it actually turned out against them. So the UPND knew how to leverage. And one thing also the UPND did is they formed a coalition. They mobilized other political parties, even though the political parties that were small, they brought them together and they made a coalition. And the UPND was like leading in this coalition, but they also welcomed other political parties. And the other thing that made the UPND win this election in Zambia, they were responsive. What I mean by responsive is the Patriot Front had a female as a vice president. And the UPND also, they nominated a female as a running mate. So they were able to respond to what the PF was doing. When the Patriotic Front would come up with very good songs, political songs, the UPND would quickly also reply in songs. So from that, the youths found it very funny, but also it was making a shift because it was a fun. So political songs are very funny. So when the Patriotic Front makes a power song, the UPND quickly they also reply in a song. So it was kind of fun, and it carried away the mood of all the youths, and the UPND almost win favor of the youth in this way. Also, the social media, the Patriotic Front, because they were not allowed so much to be on the ground, so they took advantage of the social media. They were able to network, post the message, brought out the message, and because of the technology that we are enjoying right now with this generation, the Patriotic Front underrated the power of the social media, whereas the UPND understood the power of the social media, and it worked out very well. And the Patriotic Front, they were very violent. So this violence worked against them because people never wanted it, especially when you talk about cadarism. Most market and public places were taken up by PF supporters and cadarism. The bus stations, they were collecting levy. The council were not collecting levy. So all these things, it disadvantaged the youths that were not like maybe the cadres of the PF. So this also worked against the Patriotic Front government. And the UPND had issue-based campaigns. They were not talking about individuals. They had a message about good economy. They said, we are going to fix the economy. We are going to provide free education. We are going to provide medicine. So while the other part were using the campaigns of character assassination, talking about individuals, HH this, HH that, while the UPND are these issues that really matters to the people. Then I want to say something.
Sorry, Jonathan. Sorry, we're running out of time. We're running out of time.
Just the last thing.
Okay, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, the last thing I want to say also is there's something in this election also was not just about Zambians, it was also about the West and China. You find that the Patriotic Front government had a lot of Chinese investors, whereas the UPND government is a little bit of pro-West. So you find that this election also was influenced, it was a war between China and the West. I hope you understand what I mean by that. And also the Patriotic Front manipulated the policy of, they were trying to bring about butane and other things that disadvantaged the PF, the UPND. So thank you so much. God bless you. Jonathan Malembeka, Vice President for Zambian Youth League, a youth organization here in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the insights. Very comprehensive, and we appreciate it. And from Zambia also. So, partner, are you ready to speak? Can we give partner an opportunity? Thank you.
Hi, Sidi, and how is everyone? So, very interesting conversation. So, I have a cold and my voice is quite hoarse. I think that the conversation is very enlightening. I am based in Zambia. I'm executive director for Youth Development Organization. We're based in Zambia here, where the elections that are a subject of this conversation this morning were held. So I think it is very important also to see the partnership that took place between the youths and the women. If you understand the poverty, the socio-economic challenges that Zambia's populations are facing, they mainly center around women and youth. And so when it was time to go to vote, the first experience was when we were conducting voter registration. You saw that there were long queues up the last day of issuing the last voter's card. And so majority of the people that stayed throughout the day to acquire voters' cards were mainly women and youth. And if you followed informal and formal conversations, it was very clear that the women and youth had entered in some kind of political partnership, if you like, to try and get this solution of voting out the ruling part in power then, the Patriotic Front, and they delivered just that. So the role that young people played had also a very strong basis for women, participation, for women solidarity in ensuring that the opposition then delivered change. But also the opposition UPND and its alliance partners capitalized on the arrogance of the ruling party. So one of the lessons that can be drawn from Zambia's electoral experience is also for the ruling party that become very, very confident and comfortable, too comfortable, in fact, for African experience, that sometimes they think that there's no one else that can take power away from them. And then they begin to exhibit arrogance, a lot of impunity. And that was very clear with the ruling party here in Zambia. So going into the future, I think that the ruling parties need to know that there's a point where your impunity, your arrogance cannot hold anymore. People power can then, take, position. And this exactly happened in Zambia. I think that is a huge lesson because in the past, for Zambia's election, while we are being praised for having peaceful transitions, yes, we have had these transitions. UNIP gave power to MMD. At one point, UNIP thought there would never be another political party taking power away from them, but MMD came. MMD felt that there would never be anyone, but Patriotic Front came. PF also thought that there was never. So I think that even for UPND now, they should understand from the word go that if the arrogance and the impunity with which PF characterized their leadership, the people of Zambia, the voters themselves that hold the power, they understand that they hold the power. They can remove any other dictatorial party that can be in power, even against all odds. So I think that is one lesson that we should also be able to draw from there. In terms of the young people and the role they played, the young people understood that now the future of this country, their own future, literally, is in their own hands. And they had to decide the destiny for themselves and the destiny of Zambia. So they turned out in large numbers to go and vote. Never have we had such an experience in Zambia where a voter left to home at 18 hours to go and vote the following day at 6. And so we had people sleeping on the queue throughout the night to just try and cast the first vote in the morning the following day. And you saw the lines, forming as early as 18 hours in the evening before the following day, in the day for voting. And the first person that was on the queue was a woman and a youth. So I wanted to say that the partnership between young people, the youth themselves, and the women also delivered the change that Zambia needed most. So it is therefore important that when you are a political party and galvanizing vote, it is important to understand who is a complementary voter in terms of your target. Earlier, Honorable Kangombe talked about targeting, talking about formulating messages for the youth, but I'm sure they also understood that their message would actually resonate very well between young people and the women, because the women are the custodians of these vulnerable and poor young people that have no jobs, these youths that have no skills. So the women also understand the burden of keeping such a cadre of their children that should have potentially have been in school, but they're not in school because of lack of opportunity. So that partnership started forming at family level, at household level, community level, and eventually the whole nation just united and say, young people, women, and youth, can we just deliver Zambia from the failures of trying to provide jobs to prosperity? And UPND just capitalized on the failures of PF in terms of addressing unemployment, addressing women unemployment and vulnerability, and then they just capitalized on there and then delivered the change that they desired. So I wanted to make 2 points here, Asidi, that there was partnership between women and youth, that there was also impunity and arrogance by the ruling party, which eventually could not hold any longer. And they were shocked until today. PF leaders are still shocked. They can't believe that they lost power because they thought nothing, no form of strength from any opposition political party would dislodge them from power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, partner, and Jonathan, for your perspectives as young people in Zambia on the ground who participated in this, because it really makes this conversation rich and helps us as people who are not in Zambia understand really how to, lessons that we could learn, like where the successes came from. So Honorable Romeo is back, and I see you have your hand up. Honorable Romeo, can we give the floor to you?
Thank you so much.
Hold on, let me just remove the I'm on the
you pardon me, colleagues. A lot on the table, but I must confess this interaction is very informative. Earlier on, there is a question that was posed with regards to the reference I made on Bobby Wine and the Ugandan election. I drew Bobby Wine and Uganda election as an example of not packaging a message to the directed individuals. That you ought not to have a one single line significant message for the entire country, because each and every region has got its own peculiar message. Now, from the colleagues that chip in along the way, you understand that the people of Zambia, in as much as I think this hasn't been highlighted by my colleagues from Zambia who have participated in this forum, the ruling party made it possible to ensure that certain perceived regions of the country who are perceived to be a UPND stronghold were completely victimized in terms of voter registration. I, for one, in my constituents, I have out of 10 wards, 3 of them never received not even a single national registration card, just as a way to ensure that they scale down on the registered numbers in the UPND perceived stronghold. Now, how did we equalize these numbers in the PF perceived stronghold? Now, this is where now you aim according to the resources that you have. Now, UPND spent a lot of money on the PF perceived stronghold as a way of covering up the numbers that would have been reduced by voter registration defranchising. And this we managed. You may wish to know that even during the same time of voter registration, because of the message that the UPND couched well, resonating with the voters, resonating with the youths would actually stay for 24 hours just to obtain a voter's card. An indication that these youths definitely are not going to vote for the ruling party. You may wish to know again that when the vote turnout in an election is high, just know that the incumbent is in trouble. The voters will never turn out in large numbers, long queues, if the welfare of the country is okay. They would definitely turn out in large numbers, in long queues against all odds, the rains whatsoever. People were so determined to obtain the national registration cards. Amidst the cold season, people would stay overnight just to get to obtain the national registration card, an indication that they resonated well with our message and they were fed up with the regime. Now, when you look at the measures that the ruling party had put in place to ensure, firstly, as a way of victimizing the voters by procuring heavy military machineries, a kind of machinery that I've only seen maybe in Uganda. The big water bowsers, the machine guns mounted on trucks. The people now evoked what I earlier on mentioned as watermelon, which one of my colleagues here referred to as holding or raising two different symbols, the PF symbol and the UPND symbol. They did it in such a way that when the Patriotic Front calls for a meeting, a rally, that rally will be well attended. They will go in large numbers. They'll get whatever they provided for them, whether it's money, clothes, and whatsoever. But inside, they were just waiting for that particular day to vent all their sufferings in the ballot box. The women, if you look at the people that really suffer the most in each and every government, in my own view, are the women. Where I am here, I'm alone. I don't know where my little girls are, but I'm pretty sure they're with the mother. I'm going to have my lunch here. I don't really know what my children will have. So women are very important in each and every election because they undergo the process of suffering every day, especially in a dire straits economy like it was the case with the Patriotic Front. So it was only imperative for the United Party for National Development to ensure that the women are also well represented. We had the vice president, who is a woman. Our vice president, she's a woman, and we kept our promise. Even after we attained the victory, we made sure that we give the women the first ever Speaker of the National Assembly in Zambia is a woman. And we went further, given the women the first ever Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, a woman. When you look at other very key positions, we haven't left the women. Yes, we may be lacking behind in terms of youth representation in parliament, but we are working on something that will be the first of its kind in this country, where I, for one, and a few of my colleagues have formulated a policy of youth caucus ever in the history of this country. What we really want, what we want is to have to push for a legislation quota so that we can scale up and the youth representation in parliament. How then can we achieve this? We'll achieve this by ensuring that once this has been adopted by government and enacted, according to the votes obtained for each and every political party, such a political party will be given the opportunity to nominate members of parliament from the youth pool, so that we can scale up on the youth representation in parliament. And my President Hakainde Hichilema, when I briefed him about this, he was very happy. Why? Because he realizes that a United Party for National Development has won this election from the youth's point of view and from the women's point of view. The past experiences that some of us have undergone as youths in the electoral process is very disastrous and very discouraging to many youths out there. Firstly, you have a brutal regime that arrests you every day. You are on national broadcasting headlines every day over trumped up charges. Now, other youths that do not have a political thick skin would definitely run away from the political arena. They'll get scared. Now, when we introduce this legislation quota, it will be very easy. Each and every political party will be able to nominate a member of parliament, a youth, into National Assembly without undergoing the process of campaigns and whatnot. Secondly, you may realize that politics in Africa has been commercialized. It's become very expensive, and there are a few youths that have enough resources to canvass for votes. You definitely need a vehicle, or even 4 to 5 vehicles, to ensure that you go around your respective constituents, meet electorates, give them food here and there, and other empowerments. How many youths have that kind of capacity? You realize that out of 10, maybe only 2 or 1. Now, when we come with this legislation quota, it will be very easy. So year in, year out, after 5 years,
will be able to have a crop of youths that will be financially stable because they've been nominated to parliament and they have the resources now. So the next election, they'll be able to canvass and campaign for themselves because they would have generated resources. And again, the political parties will be able to nominate members of parliament. By so doing, we'll realize that we'll have a good number of youth representation in parliament. So this can be, I know it's being done in other countries, but if this can be replicated in all the countries, you discover that at the end of the day, in the near future, we'll have a lot of youth representation in the African National Assemblies. I submit.
Thank you, Honorable Romeo. Thank you for that. Very necessary as well. So we are going over time, but we just wanted to ask if Ndahafa, if we can extend the closing to after we give the last round of questions, if that's okay. There are only 3 left. I don't know if...
It's very much okay. Please continue. I'm enjoying the discussions.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So we have 3 or 4 last questions. Please, can we make it brief? Just because other people, just so that we can give everyone a chance. So the first person was Amanda, and then we'll do Ephraim, Jacob, and then Hein. So Amanda, Amanda Sauta.
Okay. My name is Amanda. I'm based from Malawi. My question is for Dr. Matthews. He was talking about youth not being present when it comes to leaders and the results of elections. But then I was commenting to say that often it's not that youth are not present, it's just like they've been let down before, or they've seen too often that things don't change. The manifestos are not delivered upon, they're also the form. So is it such an issue so we can say that it's youth not being present? Or can we say that the leaders have not given the youth the confidence to have trust in their manifestos through their actions? That's my question.
Thank you, Amanda. So that was a question for Dr. Matthew. I don't know if you heard it, but it cut out a bit. So can you also type your question maybe in the question and answer so that Dr. Matthew can answer it? Just so that I think we may have missed that, or even in the chat. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. So then we have Ephraim Wilawa, sorry. Can we give okay, great, thank you. Can you unmute yourself, Ephraim?
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you that are experiencing another set of Greenwich Meridian, because I know we have different moments. Thank you, Madam Moderator. If I may be corrected or guided, how many minutes am I accorded?
So we are actually running out of time. Is it possible to keep it as brief as possible? Can you articulate it in like a minute? And then if there's anything more you have to say, you can either type it in the chat so that we can add it in our report, or make sure that one of the speakers gets back to you, or even share it on our social media.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. My full name's Ephraim Wilawa from Zambia, and a member of Zambian Youth League, as well as I'm an educationalist. Madam Moderator, kindly allow me to probably ride on the protocols you earlier observed by your able leadership, and thanking you for this engagement. This is a very beautiful engagement. Trust me, believe you me, our moderator. It is very, very informative. However, political participation is very, very important and very key to national development, especially when it comes to the youths in particular, as we endeavor to take part in the political space. But allow me, Madam Moderator, to literate probably few factors that led or that should normally leads to failing to participate in the political space by us, the youths. Number one factor is that there's lack of awareness on the democratic freedoms which all of us, you and I and anybody else, were supposed to actually enjoy. And therefore, this causes the gap. And number two, lack of inclusion by the existing policies, especially in our governance system. This endeavors actually that it calls for reforms in our constitutions or governing constitution making process so that there is much inclusion. No wonder the women, the people with living with disabilities cannot be part and parcel to the higher levels of respect because of lacking of that inclusion in our policies. Number three is intimidation and brutality by the police, especially an example where Comrade and Honorable Kangombe, our MP, and many others, those that have highlighted. Zambia was not an exception, especially in the previous regime. We had faced a lot of brutality by the PF government. So because of that, it intimidated a lot of able, gallant men and women who are, in this case, the youths, to participate effectively in the governance system, and which is a danger to the society. Number four is corruption was at its peak, whereby we were unable to raise resources to actually venture into social and economic sectors. The social development goals were not well established and implemented by the previous regime because they were not prioritizing. The last factor that sometimes leads to failing to participate is lack of freedom space. I think we never had freedom of expression and never had access to the media houses. So this actually in itself blocked fresh mindset breathing. So we indeed entangled or embedded with some of these factors. But Madam Moderator, allow me to also believe that what Honorable Kangombe, the MP of Sesheke, did highlight of the voter registration. Our voter registration of the Zambian governance system was compromised, especially at a time when youths wanted change, but it was a different child, or rather it was compromised in the aspect of probably demeaning the numbers. So they knew that the Zambian youths wanted change, but because they had a strategy which was endangering the voter, of course, the voter probably situation that we should have had, this endangered the whole process, and most of us were actually blocked. So even as much as we understand to say we had much, of course, the victory on the Zambian side, which was prioritized by the youths, but because of the same compromisation on the voter registration by the PF regime, not much. Imagine 1.8 million Zambians voted that against 18 million. Then there must have been a very big problem. So this is why it happened that way. But Madam Moderator, again, with factors that led to the Zambian victory, especially in the electoral process. Number one is what others have spoken about. Issue-based campaign was seen by the UPND government, and a lot of it actually changed the mindset of belong to nobody or belong to no party. Everybody joined the team, and so that they are able to concede, defeat, of course, the PF government. We had high levels of employment, employment levels or unemployment levels, so to say, which characterize our country. And there were a lot of poverty levels everywhere around the country. Cost of living was very high, which of course President H has been talking about. To conclude, we had social and other economic problems which led to the solidarity by our Zambian youth. So lack of social amenities, imagine as I conclude an example of probably a school in one of the localities, you'd find that they are still living or still getting education or attending education in a thatched building and with no desk, but on probably on bricks and so on, or probably logs. This was uncalled for in a very systematic and well-established governance system like Zambia. But because we like policies, we like implementing them, this is where it is. No wonder we will always appeal to the able new Dawn government through even the Honorable Kangombe to making sure that there are reforms in our policies. They are also in the process that we usually have by our lawmakers, so that there is inclusion of the younger men and women and the people living with disabilities, so that they take part. Lessons drawn from the 2021 elections. We have had the realization of the democratic rights by both men and women, the old and everybody. They realize that we have the democratic freedom. And because we're lacking that, we spearheaded as youths to make sure that we were ready for bloodshed. And everybody moved into the swing and we did protect it. Number 3, the political dispensation through solidarity stands by the young people led it very well. It inspired many Zambians so that we are able to drive the developmental agenda ourselves. And no one should be able to intimidate. The last one is identification and also intensifying the protection of votes during the electoral process, which Honorable Kangombe talked about. We had tightened and hastened the security during and, of course, after elections. Actually, before, during, and elections, where all the polling stations were intensified with security, and this led to the vast protection of votes. You saw the margin between the current New Dawn government and the previous regime was very huge. So this was 100% performance by our Zambian youth. My submission to you, the Madam Moderator, is that we must start building, like you have done. This engagement is very key because this is more of a capacity building that everyone on board is able to understand, contemplate, and be able to implement. I thank you, Madam Moderator. We need to start engaging each other at platforms like this one, and this will bring a lot of change to the Africa and everybody. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. I think I echo your sentiments that it's very clear that young people in Zambia, young people on the continent in general, but it seems like as young people in Zambia, you have a lot to say and a lot of reflection about this, and maybe this should be a start of a discussion, but not the end of it. So, Jacob, are you able to articulate your point in 1 minute so that we can give Ndahafa a chance to do a closing?
Hello.
Hi, Jacob. Can you make your point in under a minute?
Yes. Politics in Africa really, it is just a blessing that some countries are doing well, and for some reason which could be because of the history. You know, they didn't have to undergo a lot of violence that caused the culture of militarism, where if you have to change anything, it has to be by same way of use of military approaches, which to a country like Uganda is quite challenging. You find that young people are contemplating living whatever to fate, or God will do the rest, or nature will just have to answer to the call of the people. So it's quite challenging where there is no space, where there is no opportunity. I was looking at the statistics and seeing how for the last 40 years, the generation, the youth, the young generation has gone down from 60 something, between 60 to 70% to around 50%, which means the generation is getting extinct because of lack of opportunities for young people, having no voice, having no stake in the country. So really, we need something also that I find lacking is the probably the information, the right information, the right skill of leadership and approach to a liberational cause. I've always found trouble with young people just having to show as if they are football fans. Let's do this, but you are facing the barrel of the gun, and then you just and then hundreds are killed. There is no strategy. I find trouble of listening and following some of these people. Without a strategy, very well you are facing a very dangerous person. You are facing a lion, and you don't even have to do something to equip yourself, and you just say whatever happens, just because you want to like a Bushiri, is it Bushira here of somebody there, to show that you are courageous and you can be a hero, but at the end of the day, you will be forgotten, you will be lost, you will die, and you will be forgotten. So I think my only concern is the lack of strategy. Young people want change, but they don't know how to pursue it. And it is causing trouble. That is my view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. That's a good way to end this discussion, I believe. Dahafa, I'll give the floor to you. Thank you for your patience. And also thank you, participants, for the rich views that you had. Wish that we could have this as a physical platform. The problem with virtual platforms is that if we talk for long, some people don't have access to data in the same way. So it's unfortunate, but it seems like we should continue to have this discussion. So yeah, Dahafa, I'll give the floor to you. And thank you, Jacob, once again for that. Very insightful.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think firstly, I would like to commend Minds for this topic, because this topic in itself is very progressive for the future of Africa, as the world has really created the perception that coup are the only way that you can willpower in Africa. It makes us to focus our attention on strengthening our systems, institutions, and really processes. And as Nyasa has said on this discussion, is that Africa does not need strong men, it needs strong institutions. And the second point really I would like to highlight is to mention that Zambia has always been at the forefront of the democracy, and in actual sense, their solidarity is what enabled countries like mine to actually become independent. So the lessons continue today. Thus, what stood out for me really in the election of Zambia is that there was a clarity of a generational pursuit. It's like the youth of Zambia knew what they wanted, and they knew that they were the majority as well. So they chose a party that they felt best aligned to their vision, and they organized themselves. So they registered as voters, and not only as voters, but also as participants, and where the Honorable has informed us that there were the poll stations, and there were also members on the ballot paper. So for them, what I can actually see here is that this slogan of nothing for the youth without the youth it wasn't just a rhetoric for them. It was a practical something which was put into action, and it actually overshadowed the stockery statement that most people uses in their statement, because we have so many statements about what is being done for the youth. But here we saw a practical session of young people themselves organizing themselves through practical action. And another lesson that I can really say stood out for me was that there was a clear objective, and most importantly, they were aware of the environment that they were operating in, which enabled them to develop a strategy. And the watermelon strategy, which was mentioned here by Dr. and and again by the Honorable, that they develop a strategy that help them to camouflage and implement their action. Often young people, we criticize when we see an obstacle, we withdraw. We don't develop a strategy that enable us to continue. And this usually comes because of a lack of an objective or a goal that we have put out for ourselves. And another lesson for me really is that they took their historical context into consideration, which was visible by the effort that they put at the polling station to enhance security and mitigate vote rigging and stuff like that. And they also had a target. They focus on their strength. Most of the time during election, people focus on winning new members, or not really. They don't even have a self-awareness of what their strengths are or where their strongholds are. So they focus on their stronghold as and then they develop on that and they enhance them, and that also created inspiration by those that are not members. When they see their strength, they then also bought into the mission. That's why the Honorable Speaker, Member of Parliament, there has also said that in areas where they were not so strong, their president still got a lot of votes. And also what also stood out for me is that they had a target, and this for me is really that if you as a young person become patriotic to your country, that expands your sense of duty and of purpose. So then it also eliminates issues like self-interest, because your self-interest gets redefined to become my interest as a country, as a citizen. So as Honorable Kangome, if I pronounce the name right, said that they had a message for each region and each group. So they were very intentional, and they had a targeted approach to their thing. So they were not just shooting and trying to get votes from everywhere. They had a message which is tailor-made for a specific audience, and they packaged it right. So a great lesson from Zambia is really to have a political message that is packaged for each region and each age group, and that we as young people need to ensure that our activism and political participation is not only intentional and it's not only intentional, it must also be consequential. So unity of purpose, patience, and courage is really what the youth of Zambia taught us. And I think I can also add that we as young people need to realize that we must stop playing victim. And that is a key thing that I'm seeing here when I'm listening to the young people of Zambia speaking. There's very little victim mentality. There's very little of we need, government should do this, or there's nothing like this. They knew they didn't have anything, but what they did is focus on their strength, and they capitalized on their asset, which was themselves, and also positioning. And as it was stated here, that resource, as much as we always, as young people, try to say money is, we don't have resources. Here we're informed that in this election, they actually use less resources than the previous one in resource. That speaks to how much leverage we can buy by organizing ourselves, and that money, as much as we like to see it as the biggest obstacle, is not really the biggest obstacle. And really, as I'm coming to my closing, I think what we have to realize here, and what personally has inspired me, is the fact that listening to them, it actually makes me realize that we are more actually of the most advantaged generation, contrary to what it appears, that we are more well equipped. Firstly, we are technologically advanced and more aware than the previous generation, for which we are expecting to be given power to. And here, really, power is not given. You take it, and you take it in a right way, systematic way, in an organized way. And that this notion of us believing that those in power have a hold on us, they only have a hold on us. And in power, we mean corruptly, because for us, I feel in my country, we have a ruling party which is doing quite well. But this thing, it depends on also that young people need to realize that it's not about party politics. It's about what objective, and that's why I really like the way the Honorable has delivered his statement and how his focus is, because you can that there is not about partisan. it's about the people. Hence, they're speaking about the constituency fund and how they are planning to increase that. So they have people in mind, and that is their focus. So for them, the political party, obviously, it speaks to their ideology, and they choose the party that best aligns for them. But that is not their sense of purpose, because a lot of time I've seen in Africa that people use politics as a life or die. No, life or death is it's about it's a people, your community. We come from an African community where Upundu is what lives us. So for us, our community, the next person, whether they come from a different party, because when you become a leader, if you are a political person and you are running for office, you must know that when you become a leader, you don't just become a leader of people of your party. You become a leader of the whole country. So decampaigning, how do you then treat these people that you have decampaigned? So you should focus on your message and not really about that, them and us, but rather we are all us. We are just all citizens of a country or of a continent who are using different methods that we feel best aligned to our principle to get to our intended objective. And that really comes across when you, as a youth of a nation, have a clear objective what you need to achieve or what. It's what allow us all, we come from different countries, we are here from different political parties, to have this conversation. I've seen that this conversation has been very meaningful. There were no insult, there were no statement that actually were kind of encroach on rights or responsibility of another person. That speak to us understanding what we stand for. And really, I would like them to say that since we are now more enabled to have technology, which we as a generation seem to be leading, we actually have access to power, because power is access, and technology gives us that. Within a second, we are able to reach 1 million person. That is the power we have, and that is what we must enhance as a generation, and we must harness it and leverage on it. In conclusion, I would really like to say that even though we have political affiliations and that we are all from different backgrounds and all of us want to get to the top, the important thing is that we must realize that we are all generational allies, and that we must then be people of character and of principle, because the decision that we make today will determine our fate tomorrow. I thank you.
Thank you, Ndafa. Thank you, speakers. Thank you to all. It was really a rich and productive session. The conversation was insightful, fruitful for all of us. My key takeaways for this conversation, I can just summarize it in words: strategy, vision, messaging, persistence, consistency, youth and women participation. These what are the learnings that we got from the Zambia election. But more, it's true that the youth participation with the Zambia election was good, but there is still room for improvement. So with those words, we're going to conclude this session. I want to say thank you to all participants, but also thank you to all speakers who have taken the time during the busy schedule to be with us. We have realized Honorable Oron, who's like in and out from Parliament to talk to us, and all the other speakers, we thank you. We have also realized among the speakers that there were other speakers among the attendees. We have noted your name because this is a continuous conversation. We'll reach out, invite you so we can carry on the conversation, because there is a lot that needs to be said and for us to do. For the young people in attendance, we're using your voice and we are appealing to you to be the one that will amplify the conversation we had here, because we also need to be consistent with the learnings from those conversations. When we learn, we need to go back to our community in order to just have another replicating effect, to have as more people as possible, as more young people on the continent, to learn from what Zambia have done, so we can do the same in our countries. So thank you to Dr. Moyo, the founder of Mind, for opening this session, but also thank you to Mrs. Machel, our chairperson, who was with us for the almost 3/4 of the conversation. We thank all the speakers. We thank SIOF, our partner. They're always there when we need to collaborate on a project. They're always willing to come on board. Thank you. Thank you also to the Mind team, because it's a tremendous effort to come with all the technicality, the logistics to get everyone on board. Thank you. But also, last but not least, the participant. Thank you. Your inputs, your insights, your questions were valuable for us to have this conversation. The reason why we're even over time, but it was all worth it. We say thank you. We will carry on the conversation until we meet next time. Stay blessed. Bye-bye from Minds. Thank you.